Hi friends, it's Charlene from stampinwithcharlene.com. It's Tuesday, May 11th, 2021, and tonight we are going to be making this beautiful card, and we're going to use the water painters from Stampin' Up to create this great watercolor effect on the flowers. This is the Jar of Flowers stamp set, and if you can see here, it's a 3D situation where the jar, there's a little jar dome that we're going to put over the stems. And I'm also going to talk about the Jar of Flowers stamp set because it is what is called a reversible stamp set, which means that some of the stamps you can flip over and you can use either side to stamp with. So let's get started. Before we get started, I want to show you a close-up of the card and talk about the different things that I use to make it. A lot goes into this. So this is the new In Color Soft Succulent. That is the color I used for the card base. And then you'll see behind this is a piece of Designer Series paper. This is the new hand-penned Designer Series paper. And like I said, this is the Jar of Flowers stamp set. Because, oh, and this is the watercolor paper. Because we are using the watercoloring technique, this black ink that I use is Stays-On ink. Stays-On ink is waterproof. That's why when we're using any watercolor technique, you want to use Stays-On ink as opposed to Memento ink. Memento ink is great for when you do the blender, the Stampin' Blends. But for watercoloring, you want to use the Stays-On ink. I also use these brand new little gems. They are the new In Color gems, which they're adhesive backed. And just look, can you tell how brilliant they are? They're so, I don't know what the word is, faceted maybe, which really makes them pop. It makes the card just really, the colors, it just pulls them all out. So let's get started and I will explain what reversible stamps do, because this Jar of Flower stamp set has reversible stamps. This one here is reversible and this image here is also reversible, and this one. So I want to talk about that too. So let's get started. The first thing we want to do is just adhere the Designer Series paper to the card base, and then we can set that aside. And I just want to show you, I love the stamp case because it has the images right on the insert, and you can just stick them on there and it's easy to find them and keep track of them if heaven forbid you misplace one of them. So I want you to take a look at these stamps here. You see the color here is gray, and then it also has the outline. That indicates that these are all reversible stamps, as opposed to this image here, which is just the outline of the stamp. So all that means is that you can stamp, you can adhere the stamp to your clear block this direction, which when you stamp it will give you the lined images, or you can flip it over and it still will adhere to the clear block, and it will give you the image of just the jar. So this, when you stamp it, the entire jar, say I stamp this in green, this entire jar image will be green. You won't have any of the lines on it. The lines are on this side. And this is, the same thing happens with this smaller piece. This is good for the bottom of the jar where you can stamp it and just have the ridges in it, or flip it over and have the smooth side. So this is like, it's more stamps when you think about it. You're getting an additional 3 stamps in the stamp set because of the ability to reverse them. So all of the stamps that are reversible are indicated in the Stampin' Up catalog. Okay, so let's get started on the watercoloring and making the beautiful part of the card. Because we're using the Stays-On ink, which is permanent, it will stain the stamp, but don't let that scare you. It does not affect the usage of the stamp at all. So just make sure you stamp, get the ink on there really, really good. And if you made shrinky dinks when you were a kid, that's what this Stays-On it just takes me back to making shrinky dinks because that's what the smell of this ink is like. So I am going to first stamp the image just about right here. And I want to make sure I use my foam mat underneath so that the entire image is stamped. And I'm going to set that aside. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here with the coordinating jar punch, and I am going to center this underneath the flowers and punch it out. You can do this the other way too if you want to. Do the jar and then punch the flowers. Punch the jar and then stamp the flowers. But the space in here, don't let that make you nervous because we are going to be putting a bow there. So that will hide the space. But that is the first thing you do. Now make sure you hold on to this jar piece because what we're going to do with this is take this stamp, which are the stems, and we are going to, let me see, I think there is an up and a down. We're going to ink this one. And then we're going to stamp this on this little jar that we punched out, just like that. So now that we have these things stamped, I'm going to talk about the water painters. These are so fabulous. 3 come in a pack and they all have different brushes on them. This is great to do if you want to do like a big watercolor wash across the entire piece of watercolor paper. Just make sure when you put the lid on that you hold on to the bristles when you reattach the lid so that they don't fray. And then there's a medium size, and same thing with the bristles, and then there's the small one, and this is the one that we're going to use on the project. And what you do is you just unscrew the cap, fill it up with water, and that's all you do to using them. That's all there is to it. So let me show you a little trick on what I do with the ink before I start doing the watercoloring. I am using 3 different color inks on the flowers and the stems. I'm using the new Fresh Freesia, So Saffron, and Soft Succulent. So what I'm going to do is take my clear block and I'm going to open the ink pad and I'm going to apply some ink directly to the clear block. This just makes it so much easier to get the ink onto the water painter. So, and let me put some of the So Saffron down here at the bottom. So put this in your bag of tricks and remember this for the next time you watercolor because it makes it so much easier. I'm not going to need much yellow, so that's why I don't really need that much ink on there, but I'm going to keep the ink pads close by in case I do need some more. And I have my thin tipped water painter, and then I also have a paper towel nearby, and I'm going to show you why that is. So let's take we'll start with this piece here, which is the jar with the little stems, and I just want to squeeze the water painter till I see some water drip out. And then what I'm gonna do is just pick up some of the ink off of the clear block and I'm going to go in there and start painting. And the darker that you want it, the more times you go over it. You don't want to saturate it too much. So you just color it in like that. It is so fun and so relaxing. And if the images are bigger, then you just use the medium size brush. So you go in there and just paint in all the stems. and I will finish that off camera. And now let's go on and we will paint the flowers. Okay, so I went ahead and I finished my stems, and then I did some leaves and these smaller flowers on this piece here. And I want you to see that the tip of the water painter has some yellow ink still on it. So the way to clean it is you just take your paper towel and then you squeeze the water painter until it runs clean. And now you'll see that it's completely clean, so we can start doing the fresh freesia color and paint in the flowers. And the darker that you want them to be, so if you see here, I attempted to shade them. I am really not an artist, so I have no idea about where to shade. But what I did was I just used more ink on some areas than on others. And that's how I made some areas darker. So I'm just taking the fresh freesia and going in here and painting the edges. And this really is, it's so fun. Another one of those great things that you can just get a bunch of supplies ready while you're watching TV, if you're binging a show on a rainy day, and you can just make a bunch of these. They're so fun to do. So if you see there, see how I just kind of left it as a glob, but you can also go in there, kind of squeeze a little bit more water out and rub it around more to spread it out. So I haven't applied any more ink. I'm just taking the ink that's there and spreading it like that. So that's how you can change the shading, another way to do it. So let me finish coloring these off camera and then we will assemble the card. So now the flowers are all colored in, and I have my little jar with the stems colored in, and I'm gonna grab the card base, and what I'm gonna do is set this piece on top. I'm not going to adhere it yet, but I'm gonna place it where it's supposed to go, and then I'm gonna take the little jar that we punched out and put some adhesive on the back, and then I'm going to making sure that I hold this piece steady, I'm going to go in there and place the jar back into the space where we punched it out. Just like that. Now I am going to make sure that that sticks down there to the card base, and lift this up and then take one of these adorable little mason jar domes, which I'm so happy did not retire. And they're meant to use if you want to make a shaker card, but I'm not going to put anything in here. I just want to use it just for the effect. I think just even without shaker stuff, it's still fun. So I'm going to remove the adhesive strip from the top. So this has adhesive on the front and the back. And I'm just going to put that in there like that. And then I'll remove the adhesive from the back. Okay, and it would be really easy just to pour some shaker stuff in there, but I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna put adhesive on the back and then go back on here and just line it right back up. So you can't even tell that it was punched out. So it's right back in place. Just like that. Now I have a piece of ribbon from the Flowers for Every Season ribbon combo pack, and I am going to attempt to just tie a bow freehand. There we go. A bow out of nowhere. And just play with it until you get it to how you want it. And then I am going to just put some adhesive right there and attach the bow. Give it a minute to stick down, and while that is drying, I can trim up my little tails. I like that the bow is very prominent. Whoops, I don't think that's gonna work. I'm gonna need a stronger adhesive. I will go back in when I'm done and put some tear and tape on there to hold the bow down. I like that the bow is long, that the tails of the bow are long and dramatic. And then I'm gonna go in here finally and pick a couple of colors. Now, let's go back to the sample here. There was a little boo-boo there and here and here. So that's how I determined where I was gonna put the little bling. So sometimes bling is our best friend, not only because it adds to the card, but because it hides the little boo-boos. So that is it for tonight's card. There's a lot of information in here, a lot of different techniques. I hope you enjoyed that technique. I also want to remind you that if you love all things Stampin' Up, now is the time to take advantage of being able to purchase $155 worth of product for only $99 plus tax and free shipping. What you need to do is just sign up to be a demonstrator, and then you don't ever have to order again. There is no obligation to ever order again. I have had several people do this in the past where if they want to purchase a large item like the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine, they sign up to be a demonstrator, and that way they can get the machine, and now you can get other products too with this great special promotion. So if you have any questions, just send an email to Charlene at stampinwithcharlene.com. And thanks for watching. I will see you next week.